The African American Legends series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, literature, and religion. We will explore how African Americans who've been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity have succeeded. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Lloyd Grant, the publisher of the KIP Business Report, which is a very innovative publication about blacks in business. Welcome to African American Legends today, Lloyd.
I'm glad to be here.
Now let me hold up the KIP Business Report so that people know what we're talking about. It's a wonderful newspaper really, that covers black businesses all over the country. It's an idea that you conceived and have developed for the past 5 years. So tell us how you conceived it and what your objectives were.
Well, my wife and I, we co-founded.
Your wife is Cynthia Franklin, who's your editor.
She's also the editor, the editor-in-chief. It's responsible for all the content. But 6 years ago, we were running a marketing communications company where we, developed everything from annual reports to helping businesses with marketing strategies, and we wanted to reach out to the African American community. But we did not find a vehicle where we're able to identify them. We knew people were around because as you go around networking, you're meeting and you're talking to people and you're kind of finding out what's going on. But there was no extended griot, if you will, to say what's happening and who's doing what and who's made a move and what's about to impact us.
A griot, by the way, is the African term for the one who carries a message in the West African villages.
Yes.
G-R-I-O-T.
Yes.
It's not a commonly known term, but the concept is commonly known because in the black community we have griots all over the place.
Yes, yes. And so as we looked around and we looked at the New York Times, we looked at the Daily News, we looked at the main business publication, Cranes, we didn't see folks that looked like us. The Times, of course, would do the best coverage, but in the Times you could find a story on one of us. It could be in any given day, in any given section, not necessarily in the business section. Most often it's not in the business section. It's in art, it's in entertainment, it's in leisure, it's in real estate. So to find out what was going on with us meant you'd had to kind of dedicate yourself to a full-time job of reading the 6 to 8 sections of the Times or the occasional story on Harlem that appears in the Daily News, because they seem to think that everything black is Harlem. So we said, we already had clients that we were doing publishing for, contract publishing, including the Daily News. We used to produce all of their specially targeted publications aimed at the black community. We would do writing, editing, design, layout. They would handle production and sales. And every time we produced anywhere from about 6 to 8 of these a year, magazine and newspaper supplements, we were producing 480,000 copies for them and distributing. And that made us, for that period of time, the largest black publishers when we were doing those publications. We did that for a number of years with them. As we looked around, we realized, we had the capabilities and the skill to do it. What's to stop us? And the only thing that stopped us was just money, which, of course, is a big issue. But we moved ahead. We took our life savings. We came up with a name.
What does KIP stand for?
KIP is an acronym for Knowledge is Power, and it actually came from my mother-in-law. When we were setting up the company, we were kind of debating what to call ourselves. So we were looking at all kinds of different iterations of things that would emphasize black. Everything from the name of a stone, obsidian, to, I forget some of the names. And at one point we were having a discussion, we were talking about this quote that both my wife and I like from President Madison that said, "Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and the people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power that knowledge brings." And my mother-in-law liked it. She says, the essence of that is knowledge is power. You guys ought to call yourselves KIP. We said, hey, that sounds nice. We took it, and it stuck, even to the point where there are a lot of folks that don't remember my name, but they will say KIP, and everyone remembers KIP, and some people call me Mr. KIP or whatever. But the name actually stuck and it actually works, but it stands for Knowledge is Power.
Now, what kind of things do you cover in the report? And then we talk about your internet site as well. What kind of things do you cover and what's your thrust?
We focus on the economic well-being of the urban business community. And by that...
Now, is that a euphemism for the black business community?
Black, but we're also inclusive. We do, cover some things that are going on with Hispanics and Asians, and we do that because we feel that when you talk about black in a vacuum, sometimes numbers and things sound better than they are until you compare them to a larger number. So, for example, people always talk about the black buying power. Oh, it's 500 billion, it's 600 billion, it all sounds great. But when you then start to stack it up and compare it to other groups that are smaller than us numerically, or even to the larger number, well, it's not that large a number, and it says that we still have a ways to go. Or you look at when the Census Bureau figures came out a few years ago, everyone was trumpeting that black businesses had a double-digit rate of growth in terms of the number of businesses. And in a vacuum, that sounds great. Hey, double digits, we're growing better than the general society. But when you look at Asian or Hispanics, well, they're growing at triple-digit rates. So therefore, we're not going all that fast. We might be doing better than overall America, but we're not doing as good as the Asian community or Hispanic community. So we feel it's important to have things in perspective, to see how we're doing, to be able to look at everything. So we do look at everything. But in terms of what we cover, we try to monitor everything that will have an economic impact. So there are community development issues, economic development, business development, housing issues, and then we sit down with politicians like Governor Pataki or Mayor Bloomberg or others, and we talk about their policies as it will impact our community. And we also go to other policy makers, government, nonprofit, community development, banks. We talk to a lot of the banks. Because of Community Reinvestment Act, they have a big role in what happens to our communities economically. So, we talk to them, and we try to hold people to the fire. And if you make a claim or a proclamation that you're going to do X, we compare your proclamation about doing X with someone else's proclamation of doing X to see where you stack up. So, for example, a few years ago, and I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but Citibank made a proclamation of what they would do for Community Reinvestment Act, and Citigroup, of course, is the largest financial institution on the planet, but they made less of a commitment to Community Reinvestment Act than did any number of the other banks in the top 10, from Bank America to Chase to some of the others. They made technically a smaller commitment as a percentage of their size. I mean, it was a large commitment, but as a percentage of their size, they made a smaller commitment. We talk about that, and we say to folks...
Now, you talk about it. One way to do reporting is to just give the facts and indicate they said they're going to do this, they didn't do it. Another way is to editorialize. How much editorializing do you do?
Quite a bit, actually. We are a bit opinionated, and we kind of get out there and we state our opinions. And as a matter of fact, of the 13 awards we won last year, 2 of them were for our editorials, both from the National Association of Black Journalists and the Independent Press Association. We feel that sometimes you have to get out there and you have to state something. If something smells, you have to say it smells. If something's great, you have to say it's great. So we do try to editorialize and to kind of get that out there. We just feel it's important because too many things get swept under the rug because of nice courtesies. You want to be civil, you want to be polite, but while you're being civil and being polite, our people are losing economically. And if you look at classic cases is the Democratic Party. Now I'm a Democrat, but I feel that the Democrats have not been helpful to the black community economically because they only think of the problems, and they do nice little things to put a Band-Aid on cancer, but they don't really address anything. So, for example, you hear about the unemployment numbers. Even during the great time, the quote-unquote great time of the Clinton administration, when the economy was growing and booming, black unemployment was still twice as high as everyone else. And even though it was the lowest that it had been during the time they were recording, it was still twice as high as everyone else. Also, when you then look at that, you look at it today, take Brooklyn. Black unemployment for black males over 16 in Brooklyn is 25,000 people. But when you look at the number of black males that are not in the labor force, which is different from the unemployment number, that adds an additional 105,000 people. That says there's a lot of black people that are hurting, not just in Brooklyn, but all over, New York. But are the Democrats addressing that? Are the Democrats addressing any way to deal with the economic problems that are facing the black community? It seemed to be entrenched. The Republicans certainly aren't.
Well, then the question comes up, as a media organ, do you offer suggestions?
Yes.
Because one of the things that comes up when you face these problems, for example, now the city's budget crisis, clearly we need to raise taxes, but nobody wants to say that. As a matter of fact, Pataki is going to say no taxes. But he's trying to set it up so that other organizations like the MTA, the CUNY, and SUNY will raise fees, which are in effect taxes, and even the commuter tax. So you have to walk a thin line as a part of the media in terms of analyzing the problem, pointing out what it is, and getting hooked on one particular set of solutions.
That does present a challenge for us because, how do you go out and you hold someone accountable when you also need access to those people so you can get information out? Luckily, there are things like the Freedom of Information Act that allows us to go out and get information. However, that's been watered down with September 11th and the Patriots Act and what Attorney General Ashcroft is doing. It takes away our ability to get access to certain types of information. But we do make suggestions. What the governor is doing is a typical maneuver that a lot of politicians do. You kind of pass things off to a lower jurisdiction, or you raise fees, and it's a way to uphold your campaign, your campaigning image, and how you stand in the party while dealing with other things. Another thing that's done often and was done particularly with the Giuliani administration is debt financing, a lot of one-shots and raising the debt. Part of the problem that New York City has now is our debt service is too high. We were loaded up with a lot of debt during the Giuliani administration, which might have been a great administration in terms of crime and reducing crime, although that went down all across the nation. But it was not a great economic administration. The city happened to be, and the nation happened to be going through great economic times, but nothing was done to really prepare us for this day, which everyone now blames on September 11th, but we were starting to be in the tank before September 11th, and that just simply exacerbated things and made them worse, but it was already bad and was going to be bad without any cogent plan as to how to get out of it. So it is a challenge to be able to do that, but we do offer suggestions, and we start from the premise that, going back to the whole question of the unemployment numbers, that part of the reason why black unemployment seems to be stuck in this structural way where it's always going to be higher than everyone else is because we have the lowest rate of business ownership of any group. 4 out of every 1,000 blacks own a business, and that's way below everyone else. And we feel that if you got to 8 to 12 out of every 1,000 owning a business, there would be a huge jump or decrease in our unemployment numbers, because it's not a one-for-one gain. It's not just one, but if you have a business that employs people, you could be employing 2, 3, 5, 20 people. So there's a ripple effect, and we feel that if we make our communities friendly to entrepreneurs, and our communities are not friendly to entrepreneurs, we don't.
What do you mean by that?
Well, who do we hold up and honor and applaud and give our emotional support and outpouring to in our communities? We give it to our religious leaders, which we should. We give it to our doctors and lawyers, which we should. We give it to our entertainers and athletes, and it stops there. The business owner, we will pay lip service to the business owner and celebrate someone that achieves some distinction as defined by the white community, i.e. Bob Johnson selling his company to Viacom or whatever. But aside from that, we don't truly support on the ground in the neighborhoods the entrepreneurs. We don't invest in their businesses. We don't patronize them. We don't sit on their board. We don't spread the word about them. The minute they do one minor thing wrong, we say that's it. We're not going to do anything else with any other black business. While you can get dumped upon by the larger society day after day, year after year, and you don't make the same proclamation.
But that's a consciousness thing. That goes back to even when I was a young person.
Yes.
That because of the experience of slavery, etc., blacks always did the work, they didn't do the managing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So business would start, and we would hear, well, this business isn't working right because blacks don't know how to do anything. Now, clearly, we know blacks how to do everything.
Absolutely.
And they've been in school and all kinds of things. What can you do to change that particular image? I was going to ask you the question, do you ever criticize black businesses when they do the wrong thing? That's really a conundrum. Because on one hand, we want to promote them. On the other hand, you and I both know that some, not a lot, do the wrong thing. How do you build that image about developing confidence in black businesses?
That's a tall order, because that goes to the post-traumatic slavery disorder I think we all suffer from, to quote Dr. Jeff. But I think that too much is made about the problems with black businesses. I think that we amplify that. Any little thing, I think we blow it way out of proportion compared to any other business. I was at a restaurant owned by a black woman over on the Upper East Side, East 92nd Street, the other day. It was a small, tiny little restaurant, and the food was great, the service was great. There weren't a lot of us in there, or a lot of other people. However, came in, they're very friendly, they greeted me, menus, they came over constantly, not just refreshing the water, but when we finished with the appetizers, they took out the silverware and brought fresh, clean news. I will go out and I'll tell people about that. But most people will not go and say, I had this really great experience with this company.
Do you have a restaurant review section?
That's actually something that we're looking to do, because we want to have a holistic look at the business community, and that means more than just what's going on business-wise. As humans, we do other things. So we are developing a section in the publication called Diversions that deals with going to art galleries, museums, plays, restaurants, the different types of things that are part of us, gospel shows, brunches. Because we are holistic beings, and we want to try to cover that. So some of the things that we're doing this year, as we get to enter our 5th year, those are the things that we're trying to do. But in terms of the mindset that says that supports the black community, you have to start to get the black business. You have to start to get our religious leaders, our teachers, our media folk, and others to start to say and view that as an option. Also, though, the business owners, one of the places where they are lacking is that they don't engage the politicians. They don't engage the political structure, because they have a high level of disdain for black politicians.
And why is that?
Because they are viewed as out of touch with the real world, and to a certain degree inept. And I got into a little trouble saying this. I spoke at a COBED, Coalition of Black Elected Democrat retreat once, and made that statement. And some people were about to hit the roof and I think kill me for saying it. But it's true. The black business community does not have high regard for the black political leadership. And I think part of it is that we don't really know each other. A lot of the black political leadership came out of the civil rights movement. They are people that are involved, they come from a social service background, a civil rights background, or a legal background. And so they don't really understand or have a lot of experience with the dynamics of a market economy. And so when the business community sees this, rather than taking the time to engage them and to try to develop dialogue, they just kind of blow them aside and they move on, because white politicians, they certainly understand business. In fact,
what about the idea that businesses have to contribute financially to politicians?
I think
that's another part of that.
I think that just goes to how we operate as a community in general, because we need to do that whether we're in business or not.
Right.
You need to actively engage in this government, in society, because it's your money they're spending. Whether you're going and buying a stick of gum and you're paying taxes on it, or your subway token or whatever, that tax dollar, that's your money. Those people are spending your money, and too many of us wash our hands and say, it doesn't affect me. Of course it affects you. Every single time they raise fees, they raise the subway fares, they increase tuition, that's your money, and they're taking it and doing what they want with it. And because we don't engage, we're in the situation that we're in now. But you have to, and the business community needs to realize that they need to engage the politicians and say to them, brother, sister, look, this is how things would work for us, and we would be able to hire people and create jobs in the community that will pay taxes, and that these people will help to keep you in office. We don't do that, and a part of it is because we're really struggling. Black businesses start with the least amount of money of any other business. 66% of us start with $5,000 or less. A lot of that is because we don't have access to the reservoir of wealth that most American businesses do. That's because it's only been one or two generations that we've been out of Jim Crow. Everyone else has had 5, 10, 15 generations to build wealth.
People always throw up the example of the Koreans and people who came from Asia with allegedly nothing. And the fact is that they did have some support from their families and others.
Yes, they are not in the greatest of economic health. However, what they do have is a system where they do receive monies from home that can come in and cycle in. But they also are much more inclined to have the family together. So when you go into
work in the family,
exactly. When you go into an Asian restaurant, all those people that you see around there, when you say, well, it's right in the middle of a black neighborhood and there's no black people there, you go into a Korean restaurant, a Korean establishment, that is more than likely a cousin, a brother, a niece, a nephew that's in there, and they cycle them through and they bring them over once some money has been developed, and then they go out. So it's really like a job program for them, and there's nothing wrong with that. We should be doing that. We should create a job program. Our businesses should be a job program for our families. Too many of our families are suffering and are hurting because we don't have the financial depth in our families of the resources to pass along because of historical racism. We were cut out of the economic mainstream of society until the Civil Rights Act. So we don't have everything that everyone else has had, and it creates a problem.
Now, with all this good message, what is your readership? Do you sell the paper? Do you give it away as an inducement? What is your readership, and how do you increase that?
We look for subscriptions. When we originally started out, going just to straight business owners, we're what's called controlled circulation, where you fill out a form, and then we evaluate the form, and when we send you a publication.
You live off of your advertisements.
Yes, yes. We've also started to take, as we've expanded now to 43,000 readers, we're starting to take in subscriptions because we're expanding a little broader beyond just the core of business owners. We also have, while 57% of our readers are business owners, 36% are executives, managers, administrators. So they're not pure business owners, but what's going on in the business community, they either impact or impacts them. So as we expand our base, we start to do that.
What about schools and colleges? You got 100 and some black colleges to start out with.
Well, we focus only on New York and the New York metro area. So we are actually talking to some people now about getting into, I think there's about 9 of the CUNY colleges where we can get the publication into, and then also some of the private sector colleges we want to get the publication into. We want to start to get to folks while they're formulating their career path and get them to understand the things they need to do to have an economically and financially successful life. Even if they don't want to have a business, it's always a good idea to have, not put all your eggs in one basket, because as we see every day, big corporations from Time Warner to everyone can lay off. You always need to have something. So whether it's setting up a franchise that can kind of run itself, or investing in a company where you receive a return on investment, or having a sideline business, you should always be doing something to ensure your financial success.
You learned your lesson well. Now, what about your internet site?
We've just revamped our website, KIPBusinessReport.com, to include more timely information, so it's updated every week. We have a resource directory that lists all of the technical assistance programs, funding programs, and other types of initiatives throughout the city. We have this in our Small Business Resource Center on our website, so if you're trying to find information on how to start up, or where to go, or who can give you free or low-cost help, we have that all online. And we have current news breaks and news alerts, and our newsletter also gives you current breaking information.
Web address?
www.kipbusinessreport.com. It's KIP is KIP.
Small or?
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And so between the newsletter, the website, the paper, we kind of get information out there, and then we also do a series of events, including one we're doing May 1st called Small Office Big Growth. It's designed for smaller businesses of 25 employees or less. It's all the techniques and strategies they need to know to grow and accelerate their growth. So we do these types of things because, again, our premise is that if you increase the number of businesses in our community, you're going to see a huge increase in our economic stability. And that's not an issue that's being addressed by the Democrats, the Republicans, or the independents.
But I would suggest that even though you're locally based, working with black colleges, many of them have good business schools. You ought to get the paper down there. You really should.
Well, ultimately, we do intend to do that. We do intend to have KIP Business Reports in across the country in about 16 other markets. We feel that this can happen. We've had conversations with a variety of people, including the head of the National Black Chamber of Commerce, who said, I've never seen a publication like this. We need to get this. They're in 26 cities around the country. He says, we've never seen something like this. We need to get this publication out to all of our chambers of commerces around the country, and we intend to pursue those types of opportunities.
Well, I'm sure our viewers at African American Legends have learned a lot about Lloyd Grant and Cynthia Franklin and the KIP Business Report. I want to wish you well. You have an excellent concept.
Thank you.
And we need information, and that's what your job is, producing information. Thanks again, Lloyd, for being with us.
I'm glad you had me over.